We've all heard stories of people who seem to snap. Individuals who commit unspeakable acts, murder, violence, horror. They often leave us asking, why? Was there something lurking beneath the surface, a part of them they tried to keep hidden, or were they simply tired of hiding it? This idea, often referred to as the dark passenger, is something we've seen in fiction. Think Dexter. But how real is it? Do we all have a shadow self? And what happens when that darkness takes over? Psychologists like Carl Jung would argue that we all carry a shadow, a part of ourselves that holds repressed desires, impulses, maybe even anger. But for most of us, this remains just that, hidden, controlled, never fully unleashed. So what makes someone cross that line? Let's break it down. When someone commits a violent act, it's rarely as simple as letting go of base instincts. Often it starts with the mind, psychological factors that influence behavior. For example, individuals with antisocial personality disorder or psychopathy often lack the ability to feel guilt, remorse, or empathy. Their sense of moral restraint is weak, or even absent. For them, acting on dark impulses may not feel wrong. It might even feel justified. Then there are those who suffer from impulse control disorders. Their emotional and mental breaks virtually non-existent. Something triggers them, and before they know it, they've crossed a line they can never uncross. But it's not just about disorders. Childhood trauma, repeated exposure to violence, or years of being mistreated can leave deep emotional scars. These individuals may not start out with violent tendencies, but over time, their internal world becomes distorted. They start seeing violence not as an option, but as a solution. For some, it's not about sudden rage. It's a gradual slipping, a descent into darkness that feels almost inevitable. Our environment plays a powerful role too. People exposed to violence or neglect, especially from a young age, can become numb to it. When violence becomes normal, their sense of what's acceptable shifts. Consider someone who's constantly rejected by society, isolated from family, and burdened by their own pain. Over time, they might develop a sense of rage, of powerlessness. And when that feeling festers long enough, it can become dangerous. That rage finds its way out. It's not that they tire of hiding these feelings. Sometimes, it's more like they reach a breaking point. The darkness inside them, the passenger, stops whispering and starts demanding to be heard. So what happens when someone lets go? Is it really just about losing control? There's a psychological phenomenon known as de-individuation, when people lose their sense of self in extreme situations, like mob violence or war. The boundaries between right and wrong blur. They feel anonymous, unaccountable, and this allows impulses they'd normally suppress to surface. In other words, the dark passenger doesn't just appear, it's allowed out, because the restraints that usually hold it back, like societal norms or fear of consequences, suddenly vanish. This can happen in intense moments, during riots, in wartime, or even in isolated personal circumstances. The environment creates an opening for those darker parts of the psyche to emerge. But for some people, like those with psychopathy or sociopathy, it's more than just letting go. For them, the dark passenger is always there, always active. These individuals don't feel emotions the way most of us do. They don't feel guilt, remorse, or empathy. And without those emotional boundaries, acting on their impulses becomes easier. Violence becomes a tool for power, control, and dominance. It's not about being tired of hiding it, it's about not feeling the need to hide it at all. For them, it's less about battling inner demons and more about a fundamental difference in how their brains work. But what about people who don't have a mental disorder, who aren't driven by impulse alone? Sometimes they rationalize their actions. Cognitive dissonance kicks in. When people commit acts that conflict with their beliefs, they find ways to justify it. They deserved it, or I had no other choice. It's a dangerous mental gymnastics, and over time, what was once unthinkable becomes possible. For some, it's not an instant decision. It's a slow erosion, a journey from small acts of cruelty to larger, more horrific behaviors. Each step desensitizes them. Each line they cross makes the next one easier. In the end, it's not that they've gotten tired of hiding their dark passenger, it's that they've lost the ability to see why they should. The dark passenger may live in all of us in some way, but for most, it's something we control, something we manage. For others, though, when the restraints break, the result can be devastating. So, does everyone carry a dark passenger? Maybe. But what we choose to do with it, that's where the story unfolds. The real question is, how far would you let it go?